Jarwala La Trupa, that Lojong Tan Yep and on it, Trupa, Lojong Tomsik, La Tene, Tatea, Cerdo, Tene Tomsik, Sena, Tene Kakala, Pe Yanka Chimbo song you are Rete Yenaya Te. Tamsik se tu ngaran so ge chung gu pa che to song gu pa che re la ina ya te la to gu pa ta njik gu pa da bo ten de chi do yo ma re tini tamsik te si nyen kha chen bon da bo song wa te ka re se na che tang ge ta tanda lami ge loma la tini chu ya pon ru pa che ta te la parchi ta chingi me pa che se ju te ta la me lengin da bo ji re la tini te dupo la mndo wa ta ya po la ndo gi che do tini tamsik te kal chembo pe tende de su ma re la yin na ya chitang ge tamsik sinkin te tene kare de se na ngaran so ge yinchi minchi song gu ya ji re 당보 당 알아서 샘데 땡땡 요 말해라 드니 땡땡 메두니 야보제 그때는 반 로토바제 데라 레로 메바 전주 여바제 그 셔도 드니 담자 다 단당하랑 근데인데 제기 세네 담자 드니 담자 사도 데라 담제바디 야보래라 담제바 나힌 그 라니 세나 tene yapore mato ya tam chepa nanghin ke lani mato na tene tam chepa tel gupa yo mare la teacher na tam sik sinkin te tam chawe ke sai te drup gupa chire teacher na lo jong ka tam sik sumare.
Among the 7 points of mind training, we've now come to the 6th, which is called commitments of mind training. The word commitment in Tibetan Tamsik is the same word as used for samayam, and often the word samayam is regarded as something very severe, very dangerous maybe, or risky, and this may seem like that. Commitment or samaya is definitely something that one needs to observe and protect, adhere to, but it's not necessarily something we need to be afraid of or worry about in that sense. The purpose of the commitments, literally the words of pledge, what we articulate as wanting to do, is given by the teacher in order to ensure that the disciples follow the right course and avoid hindrances, sidetracks, and so forth, and that they proceed in a way that ensures progress. In other words, that they move along very nicely. That is the teacher's, the master's responsibility to make sure of that. So that's why the words of commitment are explained. And when the disciple then makes up his or her mind to follow a certain course, then there is a pledge taken in his or her mind. And having made up one's mind, having committed oneself to practice in a certain way, then for sure one should follow what one has made up one's mind to do. Otherwise, what's the point? There's no need to make any commitment if one is not going to follow it. The purpose of making the commitment is so that one moves in the right direction, avoids obstacles, and will have progress. And Thomas,
Tene ta tela ya certo lojong la ta lojong ka tamsik tela namba jobji sam yo la te na ne ta thangbo som te zao ge chik namba som te nyam de te na re zao chik nang de som na jeran som la da de la so re la tene jeran som te ramba yin de la hyo na tene jeran thangbo te 다 제단 송근나네 제단 당보대 로종게 켈란다 망갈아 왔음게요. 로종게 켈란다 망갈아 왔음도 되라. 로종 값을라 다 강콘도 히바긴도라 다 진진 뽕아래. 이게라 상진지 송주그선 제바래. 대다르도 당가란츠 켈랑 담자와래라. 드니 드니 랄린라 따르고요래. tel라 랍고요래 소아래. Tini tela lab sinki teya, tini te perna ngaranso ke ta tanda do jinzin pang tupa che ta. Tini yin la jam hin je chongchu ke sen je tupa che te. Tini chasan jacha ya thambanda bo che togu rebe se na togu mare la. Te tupi ke che do la lo jong ke kenla ta mangal wa sungi yo mare la. Kapka la ngaranso do jinzin pang ma tupa yung yung yo re. Kapkala tezi pang tupa yung yore. Kapkala sanghin je chongchu kusan ki tupa yung yore. Kapkala ma tupa yung yore. Yung yore la wana ta lo jong kelan ta mangal wa sinkin te kande she gure se na. Tene ta ngarang ke lo jong kelan se pa te pe ta rewa me panda bu re somne pa yu yana. Ta te lo jong kelan ta ngal ge 마도 다 나랑게 칼레 젠두시니 젠두시 베카슬라 갑칼라 야부 용거레 갑칼라 야부 마인 바인 용거레데 텔라 로종가 켈마당 가란도 마레 라 티니 도 진진 뽐베 타 갑슬라 있나요 도 진진 우니 빵 토바제 단다 람송 로버도 용거레베시니 용거 마레데 있나요 도 진진 텔라데 시견도 따니 데빵구 sombe 로다 마타와 카두 있나야 데데 시 투전들라 예바제 다도 진진 코랑 간체나 이제 다도 진진 마지 랑지레 상반다고 마인바 대견들 전히지 종주그 생이나야 당하다니 지지 도구 말에 선이 여기가 반다고 마인바 가시 투투 그때지 단다지 맞음나요 다디지 구레 상반다고 지가 로야 바지 히나 티 로종 켈란다 망갈발도 요래.
The commitment of mind training has 18 points that will be listed below. And the first one is like summarizing all of them together. And it's the sentence here, always abide by the 3 basic principles. Now the basic principle of mind training, what is that? It's the commitment to try one's best to diminish self-cherishing, selfishness, to try one's best to promote loving kindness, compassion, and bodhichitta. So what happens when we try our best? We may be successful and we may not. It may change from time to time. Sometimes our tendency to be selfish becomes less and less, and then sometimes it wells up again. And sometimes we are more kind and compassionate, and do things for others. Sometimes it may not seem so obvious in our minds. So at that time, does it mean we have acted in conflict with the basic commitment of mind training? Have we somehow violated or broken our samaya with mind training? No, that doesn't mean that. It's not the measure. It's not the degree of success that is the measurement for whether or not we are in harmony with the commitment, but it is whether or not we are giving up the attempt. That is what matters. For example, if we totally just turn our back and say this doesn't work, ego clinging is just a part of me, and there's nothing I can do about it. Being selfish is just how I am. And then one has broken one's commitment. Or if you think there's no way I can be more kind or compassionate or develop bodhichitta, this is just not something I'm cut out to be able to, then one has broken one's commitment. But if one is not that good at it, that doesn't mean that one's commitment is broken. It just means that one needs to try a little harder. And as long as we have the attitude that I will give it a good try, I will try my best to diminish self-cherishing, I'll try my best to promote kindness, compassion and bodhicitta, then one is still in harmony with the commitment. It is unbroken.
Tene ta tegendala jena nipa tela lojong tochor ma hirwa sungri warela lojong tochor la hirse na tene jita tochor se na jai sobzing da wo jela be gyepa tsingbon da wo jela ndo yorela tene ta te tochor la khande si hyoge yore se na ngarang ki do jinzin te pangpa yin ta nga la do jinzin yo ma re ndong dong da wo je se ne tene pe sacha dukbon da wo ta tene lula jin chetin me ji ban da wo ta na na yam me ma za wan da wo ta tende se na tene je te lo jong ge pa tsing bon da wo je lan ro ge wa la tende ma yin ba tene jitang ge jombo da le bo tene da jin jin jitang ge pang pang ge wa re de yin na yang ko ken dang tum ba ji si ne ya bo re ma to tene je ha jang ge pa tsing bon da wo tende ma yin ba se ko re so ma te la ni pa lo jong to jo la ma yo
No, so. The second one, I can't find it anywhere here. But it is in the original text, and it is said, don't resort to pretentiousness. Do you have something like that in one of your other texts? No, it's not that one. Okay. Oh, maybe they're together under the first point. Okay. It's still under the first. There are 3 points together, the 3 basic principles. And the second one of these 3 is called don't resort to pretentiousness. It means that don't put on a show of having perfected mind training, that you have absolutely no selfishness any longer. Like if you get sick, that you just refuse to take medicine because you don't care for yourself, or you don't need to take care of yourself in any way. But it's more in the sense of showing that towards others, so they will think that you're kind of a great, unselfish kind of mind training practitioner, and which is in a way kind of rude and pretentious, and that's completely unnecessary. So the instruction here is don't do that.
Tene ta te yandala jidan sumba te la churir mahunga sonyo la churir mahunga singite tene je ngaran so ge lojong tong da jinzin pong ba tong yin la sham ni ji se ba te chitang ge thomji la nyamba da bo je yin ji min ji gong go ge ma to tene chu te la chamba da ni ji ye de ba da bo chu te la chamba da ni ji me de ba da ma yin ba je da yul ge on de se na ta je ka shi kapkala tene tanda tundola samni ji ye de pandabo mela me de pandabo yang kapkala mela samni ji ye de pandabo tundola samni ji me de pandabo ta tende mahi ba yul jong te se na Tene tuji on the Siena Yang, Kapkala, Harampe, Chipo, Gavo, yet the Pekalan, something yet the Patago. Young Harampe, Galchin Tante, Tende Ching and Batante, Unduna, something met the Pantavota, Tende Yungi or La, Tenite, Mepate, Tujundo, Yapate. Tene Tsu Tamji, La Chanyam, do Yapate, La Calcio.
The third of the basic principles is do not be partial or biased, which means that we should not kind of divide up our scope of loving kindness and compassion so that it's directed to some sentient beings and not to others. For instance, someone may feel very compassionate towards animals, but then hate human beings, or the other way around. Or some human beings one includes within one's kindness and then excludes others. Or when things are going well, when you're healthy and happy and there are no problems, then you feel very loving and compassionate. But then when there are some problems and worry, then it kind of disappears. And one shouldn't have the attitude that it's okay to be that way. In other words, don't be biased or partial.
Tene ta tege chidan somte endo are. Ta tamsi joji ganani yibate dumba jurla ransur ya sonrela. Dumba jur sinkite ta ngaranso tu jing songo te dala chi par zambata yen la chi par manzim sambate yorela ta te jurni. Tene dala chi par manzim pata yen la chi par zambala. Tene te yinji minji kasi tutuk ta denzula chitang tene che jasha ja thamba ge joya ndabu mai pa ta ngaranso kasi tutuk ramba yendola joya che tang tene ta tel chini warela ndamba jur sinki che ta chini ba tel ronsor ya sinki che warela ronsor ya sinki te la tang ha che nga lo jong gong ki nga da jin zin mi zin ki nga da yin la ji par zin ki nga che par tam pa ba yin som kin da bu nga jal da bu ta teni che nom jur man da wa tin de tam ban da bu ma yin pa yin la ya tin de che men du se ni chen je se ban da bu tin de ma yin pa rong sur ya sin ki de kang ga da tam ba kang ga da chen lam nyam ba tene che kanga la kecha yapo shinkin ji ma to tela dubo shinkin da ma impa kanga la kung yapo shinkin ji ma to kung dubo shinkin ma impa tene kanga la chenje shinkin da ma impa ta tinde je la ronsur ya se kanga kun da tamba je la ya pa tela ronsur ya so.
The fourth point here is called change your attitude and act naturally. In the other list we have here, it's number 2. Change your attitude and act naturally. It has 2 parts. Change your attitude means that the normal attitude is to be selfish and to disregard the importance of others. So to change that means to be unselfish and have more regard for others. That is the changing of attitude. That's the first part of this one. But then there's a second, which is act naturally. And the sense here of acting naturally is not to be conceited about unselfishness. That, with diminishing self-importance and self-cherishing and trying to give more importance to others. But that doesn't mean that we are somehow special or superior to others because of that. Or that we should begin to criticize others who are not behaving in that particular way, and but more be kind in the sense of allowing others to be and not always trying to change them immediately by criticizing them and putting on airs about our practice, but to be in harmony with everyone. That's the sense of acting naturally here, is to be equal to whoever we meet and to be in harmony with whoever we meet.
Tene ta te jesu la tamsik ngaba te kandere se na yenlo nyamba je maza sungare la yenlo nyamba je maza sinke te kandere se na zo ngak je lam ngak je lam yindu te la tene kundang tunba kunje yidum bapa je tangaran su tujondur ta kecha sinke te pa melan derba je ayin bichirna tene te kecha hi gugare derba sedu te la derba yapo si gugare mato dubo si pa mahimba tene te yang yen je yen lo nyamba sedu chitang ke ta te la luji je ni je pandabo yin na yandra nga ke je ni je pandabo yin na yandra te yendo la sen je kulong ke jen ye pandabo yin na yandra te ta te yendo long je ke jen ye pandabo ta tinde ke jen ji shu de yen lo nyamba yin beche na yen lo nyamba de ji ting ke shu ni na yen lo nyamba de ta bu je par me za wa je ta tene tambe chu je on de sen na ya ta je 대파 매바다 전주 매발라 소바다 수심 냠발라 소바다 대답 담비 취지 온데 세나야 제네 제바 매자 연라 냠바데 제닝가 마레스 티니 테야 지당 넘버 2 요라라 티니 테랑 그혼 넘버 타파지 거네 다 코라라 코라이나 인다 수이나 인다 텔라 젠던도 ndela 테시 랍나 tene ti chen ti me thugre pa thugre sambache yona ti ge kohong ge tai nin jambu go ne ta chara ti chen re te pang na yapo re se lab na ne te yana nyam ba je ba mare la te mai ba tene che nesem da boda thagdo da boda tinde ge go ne te rang ge kohong number ta ba yin paru bu chen ti chün de ge go ne mai ba tene yana nyam ba te je par ma sa.
Next, don't talk about others' weaknesses. And that mainly has to do with how we communicate, how we use our voice. Our voice is to connect with other people. That's the main point of it. We interact by means of conversation and words. And when we do so, we should do it so it becomes nice, not unpleasant. That is the main point here. And weaknesses here have to do with how others look, how they speak, how their attitude may be may be perceived as, and also in terms of their wealth and possessions, how they are. We may perceive that there's something wrong with all of these areas in regards to other people, but that doesn't mean that we have to say it and go into a lot of details about it. In terms of Dharma practice and others' understanding, there may also be something lacking or imperfect there, but that doesn't mean that it's our task to kind of make it clear to everyone how there's something wrong with other people. There is another point here, and that has to do with our motivation behind it. If it is really hard of a good heart, and if we are sure that by saying something that other people may change, they may actually consider changing how they behave or speak and harm, then it is a different matter. Then if we say it nicely, that, hey, what you're doing there, and this way of going about things is not that healthy. Maybe you would like to change that, and then they're willing to consider it. Then it's a different matter. But if it's out of ill will, rivalry, spite, or other kinds of negative emotions, then it belongs to talking about others' weaknesses, which we should refrain from.
Tene ta te yendola ta te jisola tamsik trupa te yencho kanya musamo hisam yorela tene te ya chitang ngaran so ta tanda kong de pa yendola yenla nyamba je nyeng mare so yorela tene yela nyamba de je meni tu tene tsawa ti yela nyamba je pa te kani yung yo re se na nga ke je ge yo re de tsawa san la tene yung yo re la tene tsawa san la tene yung yin be cher na tene je yin na jen karendo kandendo de na de takpa ta chi se na tene de la tene san la ten yo re san la tene nga la je yo re tene yela nyamba me je be cher de la tam sik thupa ti sung de la yin ji chu la kan ya ma sa mo se tene je yin ge chu la tene jelam kare che gendo lu ji namjur kandendo nga ge kandendo ta de la jen kandendo tene za ni som ni pa tene ma sam pa che go ne tene ta rang ge ya po da bo che kan ka la ta non da bo che ta de ya bo yin ji re sam ba che la che ge te na jur go kare la tene ya te ya tanda te ya misal ge kha khare la ya ko number tak bo ge go ni tene tan de lan de chen den do de me ba chu go gun do sam na te misal ge kha khare.
The next point here is don't concern yourself with others' affairs. It is related to the previous one, the expressing others' weaknesses, which is something verbal, using our voice to do that. But where does that come from? It comes from making it our business what other people are doing and how they are. In other words, if we pay a lot of attention and discriminate and try to figure out what is he or she doing, is that right or not right, and so forth, then because of we bring it into our minds, then sooner or later it slips out of our mouth as well, which is the previous point. But here it has to do with just pondering other people's affairs, and that is not necessary. Rather, it would be better if we just have some respect and appreciation of others' kind of being, and just have the feeling that they are probably doing their best. They are probably doing what they consider being the best, and then have some pure appreciation. But on the other hand, if it is out of a good motivation, a good heart, and we do perceive some fault, then of course it is all right to try to see if it is possible to mend that.
Tene ta te jendo la ta te jes la tamsik damba te ta tanda Jamgon Kongtrul Lodrö Thaye song yo re la tene tanda kong du chi pa jendo la tangpo nga ke jen pang ko yo tene te nga ke jen pang la sem ke jen de pang ko yo sem ke jen te ya tene ta le la bo pang tu re be na pang tu ma re pang mo tu be zawa te kan la tu yo re se na nyen mo ba la tu yo re la tene nyen mo ba la tu yo ta nyen mo ba te ren ji ngo na ne tene te chi te la jang go yo re la tene nyen mo ba jang chul te kan de che go re se na tangpo ngarang ki jul la ta chi se ne nyen mo ba kare che ndo ya na nga la he dang te chi hyo chim bo yo re ya na nga la thak du hyo chim bo yo re ya na nga la nga jar hyo chim bo yo re ya na nyen mo ba chai hyo chim bo yo re ya na nyen mo ba ni hyo chim bo yo re sam ba da bo ta tinde kare ye ba te ngu zong ne tene ta tige ngu zong cha du te la ta ngarang la jen de de yo re la jen de de ye pa yin be chen de pang gu re sam ba Jamgon Kongtrul la jang se de tene te jang wa yin ta te tige ne pa ma cha la wa che yin chi mi chi ngala Jamgon ba te ngo na to pa che kan kal che re sam ba ta ba che ta tene ngarang so chu ji che chu nyam ne che na ya lu go ne shot salwan da bo che yin na ya lu ji go ne shot sal ni ta ngarang ne pa chi shu te Jamgon ba de yo re la de pang be che tu ne shot sa wa yin sam ba ta 대견도 라페나 나란스 디딥 장우치도 도지 셈베 감디 체게 와라 도지 셈베 감디 세반다고 체게 드츠 베종 미과 세네 드츠 바운데 테라 티니 미살 게 녀몬 바 나랑라 휴 쳔부 예바티 짱마 제송 삼바타고 감네 텐데세 테 대견도 라 짐바 땅와다 랑 게웨 자와 카레 소나야 나랑 게 녀몬 바 대방 부세도 이 삼바세나 티 녀몬 바티 림지림지 쳔토게 와라 Jamgon Kongtrul Lodrö Thaye Jamgon Kongtrul Lodrö Thaye rimji heto ba yin bicherna tene ngaran su Jamgon Kongtrul Lodrö Thaye.
Next, work on the stronger emotion first. And first we are trying to deal with the negative patterns of our voice, how we speak, and then about attitude. But that may not be so difficult. So easy. It may be difficult. Why? Because of some negative emotion that is dominant in our stream of being. So we need to figure out what is it actually that kind of haunts us. Which emotion is it? And then, is it anger that I'm always kind of preoccupied with, or rivalry, or what is it? Attachment. And then we figure out maybe it's one of the 5 emotions, maybe 2 of them that bother us a lot. And once we identify, then we should try to work with that one first. So that, for example, when we're doing prostrations, then we make up our mind that, all right, I'm making prostrations, but it's primarily in order to overcome this particular negative emotion. Or, for example, when we're doing the Vajrasattva purification with the downpour of nectar, then we should imagine that this nectar purifies primarily this particular kind of negative emotion. And in this way, by dealing with it, we can overcome the disturbing emotion.
Tene ta te tardo sepege ji la ta tanda tamsi te tan rebu rewa tamji pang song la tene rebu rewa tamji pang song de ta kong de he patardo tang ha ki chelam ya po se pata sem ji kom ya po se pata tene nye mong ba jangwa tenzo la ya tene hing ke yang kap ka la tende si di ya po da bo je yong ge la ya po de yong kap se ya chen che hyo yong ge wa re chen ka re hyu ge re se na ta ngarang ke me la ya po se ni tene ya po se pa la te ni ngarang la ya khorang ke nga ya po se ge re so re wa da bo je tene te chitang rewa chena che yo mare te ina ya te hajang hlosam hlope samba tsangma ji samba zambu tsangma ji re yo mare la te yendo la te yang tanda me yendo ge chur yapo se yung re samba da yang ka ka la ngarang ge yapo se na me ge ngarang la nyen ro da bo ta me yapo ndo se lap ne nyen ro da bo yung re samba yang kap ka la ta ngarang ge tanda te ta bu ge ne kap ge rewa me na yo ta tu go on de se na ngi ya po ji se du ma on pa la nga la pe rebu sang bo je thob ge re sam ba da bu rewa se na je tang ge rebu sang bo rewa se na ta te ngarwa ka yo ma re te yin na yo tanda lo jong ge kap so la chung chu ge sem je sam ba sang bo number ta pa ji se ru ni te la te si jan hyo yo re la ti chen na rebu rewa thang ji pang ko re.
Next, I believe it's the 8th, give up all hope for results. It has to do with being calculating that, let's say we're gaining some nice results from mind training, and we're able to be more kind, compassionate to others, less selfish and so forth. But then we may hold in the back of our minds that, well, then they will be nice to me in return. In other words, there's some expectation of being rewarded for being a good person with a good heart. Or it could also take the form of expecting that as I become a better practitioner, then I will be known by others for being so, and respected and become famous in some way, or renowned. Or it could be that later on I will have some good result, maybe not in the eyes of others, but through this practice I will get something important out of this at some point. And of course it's not that we won't. There is a definite ripening of or consequence of practice which ripens as a certain result. But that doesn't mean that specifically in this context here of mind training, that we should dwell on that as being something that I will get. In other words, give up all hope for results.
Tene ta te yendo la tukjin ji se pang song yo de la tukjin ji se pang song de la ta te pe gon de pare pe na ngaran su se sa go se sa go pare te na se la to yo na ti ne ge yo de la pe te yendo la ngaran su ge chitang ge ge za wa sa ge yo de la ge za wa sa pa ti hira ya pore re te na ya ta ngarang dancing hu chimboje ngarang la pembe chedo yin sambata boje yona tini te je ngarang chitang ge tarbatong tamjin chembe gongpong tobji ge jor mandowa neka khorwa pongji ma yin bang khorwa la nepe ge janda boje yin be cherna tini te la tujin ji se pang se dancing pang gu bedan dal so.
Next, give up poisonous food. This is a metaphor. And we do need to eat. We eat food. But if there's poison in the food, then it's harmful. And in the same way, we need to progress on the spiritual path. We do what is good and meaningful. But if mixed together with that, there is some kind of selfish attitude of doing it for me. I need to do this for me. Then since the root cause of samsaric existence is the clinging to a personal identity and ego, so therefore it is not totally clean. There's still some kind of poison mixed into it. So we should try to overcome that.
Tene ta te yendo la ya ta tangchi juba te la yong zangbo ma ten song yo de la yong zangbo singkin te chitang ke me ya pon de la kho yo re tene ta te tu jondo ya po si ne tangbo ya po ji te lo jai lo ni lo som lo mangbo la ya po si de pa te la yong zangbo se yo re la tene te chitang main de bo ji re 다 단다 용상보 마텐세도 술라 용상보 마텐세나 되네 지당 그 나란수 줄라 녀모 바 도든지 바 도진진다 보여 도진진도 녀모 보여라 된솔라 용상보 마텐바 당보 나란 그 야보 세바레디 있나요 단다 띠빵와다 띠 메빠세야 그단도 되네 전주 세바 마도 될라 용상보 때네 단다 난긴 그만난긴 녀모 바텐지 제조 녀모 바텐지 지선랑 되네 신인가 말해.
Next, don't rely on consistency. And consistency is usually a good quality in the sense that if it is someone who has a good character and he or she continues in being that way, doesn't become flaky, but after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you can still rely on that he or she is kind of still has some sense of integrity and noble heart. So then it's a very nice thing that there is this consistency. But here it means something else. It has to do with how we usually harm. Should we continue to be that way? Because how we usually harm is the tendency to be selfish and regard ourselves as really important, the self-cherishing that we've been explained. So should we just stick to that and be consistent with how we usually harm? No, that is not necessary. So that is what is meant here by don't rely on consistency.
Tene ta te yendo la tamsik chuchi pa te la hyongi ma ge song yo re la hyongi senki te tene chai chitang ngaran su hedang go ne chungwa te la hedang senki te la hedang rek manda wa yo re hedang rek manda wa te kahi la hedang khenzin se sem ke ten la jang te pan da bo te ta yang ne sem se yin la ne pa chan de lo ya pan da bo che ta hedang rek ni ba de hedang rek sum ba de la sik pa se na tene yin la pe sik nyam ba lam de ta tene sik chongbo sing sik chup de lam de ya pa de la sik pa se re la dan da ndi ka so la sik pa la tene ke cha du bo hi sik chup bo la chu ba jap tene se pa de ta ngaran so 제바다 로종게 제바다 만텐바인 베잖아 형이 마게
Next, don't disparage other people. It is an expression of anger. And there are different types of anger. In our minds, we can have one kind of anger, which is resentment, where something bad happened, but we keep holding on to it with a negative frame of mind, which is holding a grudge or resentment. Then there's another kind, which is ill will. We want to hurt, to harm someone. And then there's a third kind, which is spite. We want to like tear into someone else with nasty words, hurt their feelings. And that is where the third, where this point comes in here. Don't disparage other people. Don't kind of try to cut them with sharp words, hurt their feelings, and say something really nasty. Not necessary, so don't do that.
Tene ta tejen de la tamsi gyuni ba de changma gu song yo la chang gu se na ta chitang ge kutobo je ni gu de pa na yin de ro sa me pa na ho je la tene tanda te pe te kan de se na tene ngaran so tombo hedang ji hedang de kan den zai me je la hedang ji ni hedang den kan den zai ne tene 다 단단 ngaran ki phal ne pa char thugu mare ne pa char thugu mare dina te semna zone ta khadu yina tene lo khashi gi jile dawa khashi gi jile na tusi te tene ne pa char thupa chi chona ne pa char gi sambanda bo ji yo na te thrangu banda bo la tene te ta bu sambang ne pa ma ji.
Next, the 12th is don't wait in ambush. The literal meaning here is that the ambush is a place where people can't move to right and left, but it's kind of a narrow passage, and there it's easier to launch an attack. But the meaning is that we may not be capable in the present to retaliate against someone who have hurt our feelings or made us angry, so we say, okay, I will wait, maybe a few months, maybe a few years, but I'll bide my time, and then when the chance comes, I will strike. That kind of attitude, which is a kind of grudge, is not necessary. So don't wait in ambush.
Tene ta te yendala jusamba te nila mawap song yo la nila mawap se du chitang ke chik ngemba malapal ko kre tene chik ngemba malapala hyongi magi singi je ta kondo song yo la hyongi magi se du ngus chik zupa la pa je da tene nila mawap se du tene chitang ke chik ngembo yimba la tene parupo ti ko na sana tene pe nepo ya panda ko je ta ti chik jambu ge na ni tene chen ni je pa yin na chong do yin na ta te ta bu se pa te la ya tene ni la ma.
Next, don't bring things to a painful point. It also has to do with how we speak to others, but it's a little different from disparaging, which is more a direct way of saying hurtful words. Here it's in a roundabout way, where it may look like we are speaking pleasantly, but actually there's a knife hidden there in the words, so it's more kind of deceitful, but still as hurtful.
Tene ta te yenda la tanda ju ye pa te zokal lang lang min jo song yo re la tene te ya da jin jing zo xie pa je la ko ge yo re tene te jitang ge ran zo pe ge pe je ya na re ta kong re pe la zhuang yin du tene te la ran zo la zo sen ke je yo re la zo sen ke de kan de se na tene yang na pa ya je pa ma lang je pa yang na pa lang je pa ma ya je pa de ti bu ge de la zo se xiu qing bu ya pa tene de xiu qing bu ya pa top qing bu ya pa xin ka mo na yo xiu qing bu ya pa do bu kun na yo xiu qing bu ya pa tene ti chen na de ren tang qing bu je ge yo tene ti lang de te zam rentang chimpo chege yo ma re la tene mechi ki ta chala jibo ji kurjo na tene jitang ka ong de se na ta ti nzo de la chala jibo de ke ko chira ba te yina ya te kal ga ma re kare chege re se na nzo de ta che te chi jan hyo na rentang chimpo ra tene ti lang de kurang jan hyo na hyo kurang kong chung chung re rentang chung chung re la tene chala jibo te nzo la ma kal wa ji lang la kal na nzo ga chala te lang la kal na tene te kurang sen te ji ma dang wa da wa pe te yen pe te pe ga ba re la tenda kare re se na ngarang la ta chen je pho ong ge yo na ta mi ge ngarang ge dubo ji se ga yo na te ngarang ge je ba re se na ta ngarang pe ngwa cha ge la te ngarang ge je ba ma re kurang ge je ba re se na te ngarang ge chen te kurang ge den fa yo na te nzo ga kha lang la yo ba da na ki in bichi na tende ge tene ki kha nyam ba da bo te mel ka ji ba tende si nyang ma re.
Next, don't transfer the Tso's load to the ox. This is kind of a Tibetan metaphor. The Tso is an animal that is a mixture of yak and ox or cow. Or It could be that they eat from a male yak with a female cow, or it could be the other way around, from the female yak, which is called a tree, and then with a bull. But the offspring is very strong and very sturdy. It's able to carry a much bigger load than an ox. So, but it's also more expensive. It's more pricey because of its. It can work better. It can carry a heavier load. So here, when you say don't transfer the Tso's load to the ox, means then the ox can't carry it. That's one thing. It could also be that one thinks that the Tso is more valuable, so I don't want to hurt it by overloading it, so I rather have the cow or the ox carry instead, to kind of protect my assets. And that's mainly the meaning here, is that when something goes wrong, we want to protect someone's assets, which is probably myself, right? And in other words, then we point the finger at somebody else, saying, he did it or she did it. In other words, we're passing the blame away from ourselves. And that's the idea here. Don't pass the blame.
Tene ta te yen da la tamsik chonga pa te tanda nyo ji ze ma te song yo re la tene nyo ji ze te sing te ta pe na ngara so ze yu na ta te yi ndendor si ne ji yu na tene ta nga nyo gu som ba ta me som nyom de yu na sum bo te kang ka nga tong bo le pa ji nga tangbo yinki minki nga tangbo lepa ji go kre so ba lo yo re la tene ta kasi jo tu ta tangbo lepa ji ge jo ji ze te ge yo re la tene tanda te yen do la ngaran su ji long kare se na ya te ji me yen do la ngaran ya bo ji la jong ji se na ya me yen do la ngaran ang tangbo to ba ji le ka ji se na se chong ji jap na ya ngaran pe jor ba chi a ji ngaran yen ten tan ba ji ngaran ya bo ji re na som ba da bo te la jo ji ze te ba re la jo ji ze me te ba ta ngaran ya bo chong na in chong ma jong na ma jong te ji som ba sang bo te ne yen la lo sam te che ru tang ko re.
Next, the 15th, don't aim to be the best. It's when there's a race, 3 people are racing to see who can get to some place first. But the attitude that they have is, I should win. All 3 of them, they have that. It is that kind of a attitude that we may carry with us when we do any other kind of thing, like Dharma studies. We want to be the best, come out as the winner. And in other words, be better than others. I should come out on top. And that is not necessarily what is called a noble heart, which would be that I'll just try my best, but I would also like that other people become successful. Not necessarily that I'm better than them. That is what it meant here.
Tene tate yendola tamsik chudupate tolo maza sungarela. Tene tolo sena tene chitange ngarange yenla pembasi. Tene nepachona yang pamkale. Ta tende sedu te yapore te. Yena yang tige kulon te norni tangan tende sena pe maungpala nyenranda pota. Jaysiana Mahopala, Naminjin Drevo Yapundapota. Jaysiana Nekap Sendala, Mige, Zutang Chimbo, Yendin Dampalan Tongre, being a Yapuri Dogre, Sambadabuga, Tene, Tige, Mina Patandolembala, Dawajiina, Tiniting Uni Tandolembati, Yapuri, Ina, Kulon Norsun to tell, Tolo Dawaji, Della Tolo Mazas.
Next, the 16th. It's called 14th here. Don't act with a hidden motivation. The literal meaning of in Tibetan is that don't undertake hardship for some calculated intent. And of course, it's nice to take trouble for others, to be willing to suffer a bit so that others may be happy. But if our motivation behind it is that somehow it helps ourselves in the end, we will get some material benefit or some regard or be esteemed by others or become famous because of that, then it's acting with a hidden motivation.
Tene tate yendola chudin pate la de mo sungi warela la de ta la sinkin de chitang yabu yimbate de sinkin de dubu yimbata poje la kogi ware te pe ya barela tene tanda la de papate kande yungi ware sena ngarang lojong gam janchu sem gam tene ta tende sedu de la landa poje chang ta la de kande se wa gi ware sena tene lojong gam janchu sem gam de tela tesi nga jalanda boji chene nga chanchu kusan kam kene yendo mandaware nga lojong kam kene yendo mandaware somne te tene te nga jalchi pala tene semba te tesi chombo da boji cha ne tene yendo mantu bandabo tene somba zangbo yang me bandabo yen tene ji cha na te hla de pa la tene teacher na lojong kasi gam na ya nga jalanda bota nesem da boti hira pangu.
The fifth, the 17th, right? Don't make a yeah, it's you see the number 15th, but it's a 17th as well, if we count 18 altogether. Don't make a god into a demon. In other words, don't degrade the practice of mind training, where we're trying to cultivate the noble heart, bodhichitta, and the being altruistic. But then during that, we may become full of ourselves because of being a bodhisattva, thinking that I'm special, I'm superior, and unlike others who are not doing so. And this is called degrading one's the purity, in the sense that it hardens our sensitivity, so that we don't really care for others in that way, and we become more willing to be rude and uncaring, and that is called turning the god into a demon. In other words, degrading the practice.
Tene te yendola jobji pa te ta tanda chichi yenlo to duk machul song yore la chichi yenlo to duk machul sinkin te somba ngemba dabo kulho ngemba dabo je pombu ke tare la tene te yang ngaranta dendru ya pandabo je na o te shendu se to da ya pu chong song somba dabo tende lo somba ngemba je na tene te chichi yenlo to duk cholwa te ta ngarang somba ngemba ji ta ngarang ji bu chung sung somba dabo je re te yena ya te la te ne tene ngarang pe somba ngemba gin de dabo te membar jurwa yim pe na data yin la dubu chunga la gasur chi pandabota down double la gatsu god down double la dungal chunga la gasur chi pandabota tinde zani majawa.
Last one, don't seek others' pain as a component of your own happiness. In other words, don't rejoice in others' misfortune. Like for instance, someone is causing you trouble, and of course it would be better that they stopped. But if they suddenly die or some other disaster happens to them, doesn't mean we have to rejoice and say, "Hey, that was nice." They that would be called seeking others' pain as a component of our own happiness.
Tene ta tiga tangsi joji bode ta ngaran so chasang pang tup na yanda chasang pang ma tup na yanda ta te ta bu pang tup ata pang ja yin pang tup ata lang ja yin nyam se len tup je la membership ke ta la go ge wa la ta ti tam lo jong ko tangsi joji de hu ba re ten ha do te zam se na.
These were the 18 commitments of mind training, and these are definitely something we should try our best to succeed in eliminating from our minds. And the main point here in commitment is to try our best, and if we're successful, fine. If we're not so successful, it's also okay. We can just continue trying our best. So that completes the teaching for this morning. Any questions you can ask now?
Rinpoche, thank you. I was just wondering if you could unpack the gods into demons piece. I feel like I don't really understand it.
Tanda Plasena Naranzo Lojum Nisiore, Lojum Nisipati Yapore, Ranking Kangala Pengere, the Lare, La, Pla did the pubs in Lojum Nisapa Latini, Najaldoji, Nape Yapoye, the Nayin Cheperta Papa in Samatoji, and Tilatini, Yam Pempamayo, never Yungla, teaching Lada the Moabs.
The God here means the mind training, which is beneficial, which is useful for self and others. And the demon is that when it's mixed with the ego clinging and selfishness, thinking I'm special, I'm superior to others, which means that it's not beneficial, it becomes harmful.
Rinpoche, I have a question in two parts. In the empowerment last night, yesterday with Chenrezig, we were given a little mandala, a wheel, with the letters Om Mani Padme Hung on. And in the textbook, where the Kanshak Chidu mantra is rotating, the letters are standing up and then they rotate clockwise. If we look at this little picture, if we rotate clockwise, it seems backwards. Does the mantra rotate when we do the mantra, the Om Mani Padme Hung? Is it rotating? And if so, then this must be changed around the other way. That's my question.
And the Kanganam Temper, and the Gondu Tenda Kunchukin to Korea Della, Ingo Sheltemper.
Yeah, here it seems like they're written in a way where they're facing towards the center, the seed syllable in the center, In the bodhichitta, you're right, the syllables are facing outward. Then when they spin in the clockwise direction, they shine outward.
So this way we would just spin it counterclockwise?
Ende ina tini korna yang korin do gwa ta ende tagasi tempo gomya da buji ta ti ngo no te.
Yeah, if this one were to spin, then it would have to spin in the counterclockwise. But the design here is more made for how to just picture it in a steady position.
So if we wanted to spin it correctly, we would write another one and put it with the mantra letters facing outwards.
Then when it on then shenda tiko sarebe.
Re yekur sina tini kitang de tondro se tagasi hyomya da buji re la tini tanda ngaransu gomdu om dia shgendan to gom kreba. Shgendan to gom. Te kasite.
Yeah, the design here is for liberation through seeing. And if we use one for a meditation object, then the first syllable in front of the three would be the Om, and then they would be written what do you call counterclockwise.
Ma, ni, pem, and
yeah.
Thank you.
Rinpoche, I really love the Lojong teachings, but when I hear this part of them that you were teaching today, I often start analyzing my own behavior very closely and start thinking a lot and worrying about what I'm doing, and I really get very focused on what I shouldn't be doing. And I was wondering how I could avoid sort of becoming too overly concerned and overly analyzing what I'm doing so that I'm afraid to do anything.
Tanda Lojong ki kachu gabuji yes. Ina yang tam tanda machi mambu song yo. Ta rele samlo tang da ti nga chegi yes res. Ta simple mambu langitus. Tini da lega rele machi kong la ta tachi mambu tanko kosare tanda samgitu tinte tos central ki sub nang la longius and the toboyus tinte kandas targores
Ta te la ta ye kontu super ta re la ta tanda ndege tangsi jobji te zawa karire se na tanda tartuk ndreban da bujire tartuk uni ta miyun da bujire tini yinji minji ngarang gate lani tartu bi chabayo mare te yinaya ta lani tarwa la tini jobji bo ti ke dosu te kanga kogi ware se no te si samba ngemba la jen hyo wajil samba zambo la jen hyo wajil samba zambo yin de pe nambala samba zambo ra mayin paji ta tindi ki jen da waji nandro ki ware la te si hi labo da ngui sen debo da jirei samba tega tindi ki samba taji mambo si goya tindi mare te ngarang nguni ki samba zambo yo na te yapore te nguni ki samba zambo ta tanda ngarang la mendu samna ya te kali mahompa la juru ki tab se na te rimbi de do jwa.
These 18 commitments have more to do with what we are aiming at rather than being capable of following them in the present. And from that angle, it's not so complicated. We may or may not be able to follow them by the letter right now, but still we are aiming in that direction of being capable, right? And another point is they're not so difficult to understand, right? They're pretty straightforward. So therefore it doesn't require so much speculation on our part. We simply give ourselves a little inspection and then we see whether or not we are in tune with these commitments. And if we find that our good heart is clean and tidy, fine. If it isn't, then we can try to improve upon it. It's not that complicated.
Thank you.
단다 가리레세는 가라서 틈난긴 단단데 제나시 마지나 마지시가 말아. 가시 투투근다 땡아 파들 단다 대징하라나 쟁이와래 쟁들은 비rim비 저주다야 저기 단다를 거 그래 봐.
This is different from laying down the law of strict rules and regulations for how we have to be. It's not like that at all. That if you don't follow these, then you're kind of doomed. It's not like that. It's more like it would be better if we tried our best to move in this direction.
Rinpoche, that answers my question also. Thank you.
Good morning, Rinpoche. I'm going back a couple of days, and you very briefly touched on the eighth consciousness. And I don't know if I have the terms right or not, but Namche and Yeshe. Could you talk a little more about these two aspects of the eighth consciousness?
남시 소지.
근시 남시당 근시 예식
근시
개박합니다.
지단가 다단다 고아가 된 희가나 남시 근시 넘버 희바 되게 드네 뭐데 동바요래. 데 드네 코랑 넘바 데 살와 강가 샤르기요래라. 샤르와지래라. 드네 샤르와티 되게 살와티라 코랑 휴치 되네 되게 동자도 의마지 동바임바데 짜는 의마진 바라 나랑 동바임발라 동바임바 의마진이 되네 톨도요라라 딘 톨비기 차텔라 남히세요라라 되네 단다 예시 세두 되네 단다 지탄가 인자나 Njana sedu, Sanskrit ki njana sedu, he sinking jiwarela. Tela peg lozawa tamchi ki ye sinking di jorni. Ye ni koran tomba imbate. Re, tomba imbate sarva chomare. Ye ni kunji no hi koran ngo te tomba rela. Tomba imbate he undu tela. Tini te ye he lan jorga yorwa. Tin trubate rimji tralga yorwa. 당가란서 감자도 트바티 잘 렘지 단다 카툴라 요보 마다나 렘지 잘게 요라라 테니 텔라 예히스 그 예히스
The Tibetan word is kunchi namshe, all ground consciousness. And it is consciousness which the identity of which, or the essence of which, is empty. And its form, or how it shows itself, is in being conscious. But the all-ground consciousness is a little too conscious of what happens, and therefore loses track of its own being empty, gets a little too occupied, too conscious. And that is where the confusion that is what the confusion consists in, losing track of itself. And in this way, confusion can continue. The other aspect, the yeshe, in Sanskrit it is gyan, which simply means knowing or being conscious. But the Tibetan translators, they translate it as yeshe. They put an extra syllable in to make the meaning precise. And the ye means original or basic, which means that from the very beginning it has been empty already. And yet that is what is necessary to know. So the practitioner is someone who looks into consciousness to see that not only is it conscious but also empty, and through that the confusion is more and more eliminated, and as the practice develops, confusion becomes less and less. Less namshe, more yeshe.
So Rinpoche, when we're resting, let's say after we've done a completion stage in a practice, and we're resting in the non-conceptuality and have vividness and clarity. Is that both? Are we in that moment experiencing both of these aspects of the eighth consciousness?
Tsokrim dudang yarawa.
Re.
Ganga miba ganga tune tene miba shira majib ngang te nangla tene namshi tang yeshi niga nyamsun yongu yara ina chikyangba ina.
Tate rongi nyamnyong la ra le kre rongi nyamnyong la ra le du te la te titang tongcha ti kheta ngwe ma zin pe ngong la sem ke kong ke te na nyambri ka na ne khine nda bo te la nyambri ka na ne nam hi chal ri de re tene ngwe ni long tong yi hi ya bo ji ji la ji ne tong ni te ngwe se pe ngong la nyambri ka na ne yi hi chal ri de re.
That depends on the individual level of experience of the practitioner. If one has not really identified what the empty quality of consciousness is, then when the consciousness simply remains without being too engaged or involved in anything, but it's just in a very regular way, like in shamatha, then it's called the whole ground consciousness. But if the wakefulness of vipassana has been introduced and recognized, then the empty quality of consciousness is known at that point, and then you would call that the whole ground wisdom.
Thank you.
My question was, how do we know whether you were talking before about the negative emotions. How do we know when an emotion is negative? Anger seems fairly obvious, but I think there are more subtle things like fear or other emotions like that. And my second question was, is the Vajrasattva practice appropriate for all of the negative emotions?
Emotion chitang semjong ro
semjong la so
giwe semjong tang mi giwe semjong te yewa kandas chikores te dang teng dorji semba ki nyamlen te mi giwe semjong kangal selchugires
tanda mege semjong te kandichi ngu zungi nyemong pala kandichi ngu zungi yore se na ta yin la ngu su nepa yin la ngu su mane na yo remji nepa jorun ro tene tigi re te la ta nyemong pa se ngu zungi yore la tene yin la pemba ngu su pemba yana na juni pemba rabo je na gewe semjong tene doji sempi gamdi siya na nguni ge tsawa ni pangtuku rewe siya na pangtuku mare la pangtuku mare te ina ya te si nyungdu tangwa tang ngot nemba tang te la pemba yungu yore.
How do we know the difference between positive and negative emotions, right? Yeah. If an emotion is directly harmful to others, or indirectly or implicitly harmful to others, then it's called negative. If it's beneficial, either directly or indirectly, then it's called positive. Okay? Yep. About the Vajrasattva practice, can the Vajrasattva practice eliminate negative emotions? No, Vajrasattva practice cannot totally eliminate negative emotions, but this practice can lessen their intensity and make them less and less.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Karma Sang Som Do Jin Gong Su Ra Ben Jen Ta Ye Ten Le Du Ba Ba Yo Den Be Ba Jru Ka Ma Lo Dru Sha Ju Ra Sang Gu Yan Jen Ka Cha Tu Be Jen Sha Be Ta Den Jen Ru Jin Ten Le Jo Le Nam Ja Pa Shu So Nam Ni Tam Je Zi A Ni To Me Ye Ve Ya Nam Bam Je Ne Ye Ya Na Chi Ba La Dru Ma Yi Si Le So Le Dro Wa Dro Wa Shu